Estate.
Monday was Saskatoon, Tuesday was Regina, Wednesday was Red Deer, Thursday was Lethbridge, and then back to Calgary and then Edmonton on Saturday.
It was 3,000 kilometers round trip each week, every week, for the cast and crew of the Canadian institution called Stampede Wrestling.
It was crazy, it was insane. We'd stop in Moose Jaw and get gas, and we'd stop in Lethbridge and get more fuel. Other than that, drink beer and pee on the side of the highway if it wasn't too cold.
And then we'd go party at the bar, drink our faces off, smoke our brains out, get home at 5, 6 in the morning.
Long before he became the wrestling superstar known as the Hitman, a young Bret Hart learned the family business at the wheel of a 10-passenger van, crossing the prairies with a full load of big men.
Working for my father was no joyride. It was usually really bad weather conditions and driving in a van with, suspect tires.
I thought you were going to say driving in a van with suspect characters.
Well, the characters were always suspect too, maybe more suspect than the tires.
The van brought that traveling circus back to home base at the end of each week, to the Stampede grounds in Calgary. Before anyone heard of Vince McMahon, WWE Raw, or Friday Night SmackDown. The true wrestling tradition here took place Friday nights in the Stampede ring. And some of the boys on the bus would become some of the biggest names in all of wrestling. Andre the Giant, Owen Hart, the Junkyard Dog, Davey Boy Smith, Chris Benoit. But soon, one by one, each of them would prematurely die, along with many other graduates of Stampede Wrestling. In the past decade and a half, a dozen of them dead at an average age of just 41. Of the people who were in your immediate group, how many are deceased today?
I try not to count that. I'm missing too many friends. Okay. Sometimes I get angry.
Hello, I'm Bob McEwen. Welcome to the Fifth Estate. Arguably the most famous of the men in that van who got their start here in Calgary at the Stampede Wrestling Ring, who died too young, was Edmonton's Chris Benoit. He went on to capture the World Heavyweight Championship. But you don't have to be a wrestling fan to know his name, because Chris Benoit will always be remembered for something else, something that happened last summer, when the bodies of the 40-year-old Benoit, his wife, and their young son were discovered at their home outside Atlanta. It made headlines around the world, labeled a steroid-fueled murder-suicide. On this edition of The Fifth Estate, a detective story, tracking down the truth about what really happened to Chris Benoit, to many more who made their living in the ring. The answer could be a matter of life or death to athletes in other violent sports as well. To truly understand the Chris Benoit story, you first got to go back to the glory days of Stampede Wrestling. And whatever you think about the sport, however staged and scripted it may be, one thing is sure. There has always been real pain. No one knew that better than the late Stu Hart, Bret Hart's dad, Stampede's founder. Stu Hart started in the ring himself, then became a promoter, importing stars like Killer Kowalski and Whipper Billy Watson to a territory that included Western Canada, Montana, and Washington. For decades to come, Stampede would be the definition of old-school wrestling.
It's the real gritty, real hardcore wrestling. the way it was best sold.
Look out!
Good guys and bad guys were pretty clearly defined. But it was a great show for its realism. It was really quite real.
Stu Hart wasn't just a wrestling legend. He was also a legendary patriarch, raising a dozen children at the sprawling Hart home on the outskirts of Calgary. Here, Stampede prospects were led into the basement to see if they had the right stuff.
I'm ready. I'll take some moves, sir. Oh, yes, sir.
Those who underestimated the old man with the bad back
I don't feel my arms, sir.
soon learned why Bret Hart and his siblings called it the dungeon.
I got the power here to...
Stop it, sir. Stop.
Soon he'll go to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
That poor guy down in the dungeon, what was that guy feeling when he was making those noises?
It might have been close to a religious experience for him. I think he was learning the hard way that he shouldn't smart-ass my dad. You know, my dad was I think fair to say that my dad was an expert at taking it right to the edge of your stress limits.
But Stampede Wrestling was about to be taken to the edge too, with the arrival from Britain of the Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington.
Watch him go off the top now. Yes, sir. Oh, beautiful.
Just 170 pounds, with an acrobatic style, he soon attracted attention from fans like Michelle Smadou.
What a spectacular wrestler, like high-flying moves. It was like watching a ping pong ball in the ring. He was that quick.
Look out.
What the Dynamite Kid lacked in size, he more than made up in altitude. Moves that often ended in fearless head-to-head contact.
Oh, Mamma Mia.
The Dynamite Kid, I always say, was pound for pound, was the greatest wrestler I ever knew.
Why was he so good?
He was like a Wayne Gretzky in a lot of ways. He was just unbelievable. He was so good, and I've never seen anyone that I ever thought that compared to him.
And Bret Hart wasn't the only wrestling superstar to be who thought so. One Friday night, a teenage boy from Edmonton convinced his father to make the drive to Calgary to catch the weekly wrestling card at the Stampede grounds. His name was Chris Benoit. His dad's name is Mike.
When he was about 13 years old, I took him and a couple of his friends down to see Stampede Wrestling. And when we were down there, he saw a fellow by the name of Dynamite Kid.
Dynamite Kid, dominating right now.
He said to me later that night, not only is that what I want to do for a living, but I want to be exactly like him.